My name is Eleanor Grace Thompson. I am 94 years old, and I have survived 3 wars, economic collapse, breast cancer, the loss of my husband, and more funerals than birthday parties. I have stood in ration lines as a child, marched for justice as a young mother, and watched smoke rise into the blue sky on a September morning that changed America forever. I have lived through history books, but none of those things nearly destroyed me. Loneliness did. I was born in 1932 in a small neighborhood outside Pittsburgh, when the Great Depression still clung to families like winter frost. When World War II began, I was just a little girl who didn't understand why the men on our streets suddenly wore uniforms. My father kissed my forehead and told me to take care of my mother. I remember the sound of the radio every evening, the way my mother would freeze when the announcer paused before reading casualty numbers. War changed our home. It made it quieter. When my father returned, he was alive, but something inside him stayed overseas. Years later, during the Vietnam War, my younger brother enlisted. My mother stood on the porch waving at the bus long after it disappeared. He came back, but not whole. None of them ever truly did. In the 1960s, I marched during the civil rights movement because I had seen enough hatred to last a lifetime. I carried a cardboard sign under the hot sun while strangers shouted at us to go home. I didn't go home. I had already learned that silence helps no one. Decades later, on September 11th, 2001, I sat frozen in front of the television watching the towers fall during the September 11th attacks. I was nearly 70, old enough to believe I understood tragedy, but that day felt different. It felt like the air itself had cracked. Through all of it, I had my husband, Robert Thompson, 56 years of marriage. 56 Christmas mornings. He was steady, gentle, the kind of man who fixed broken cabinets and broken hearts without asking for praise. When he died from heart failure, the house changed shape. The rooms felt too large. The silence grew heavy. People came with food and sympathy. They hugged me and said, "Call if you need anything." Then they returned to their busy lives. I stayed behind in the quiet. At first, I told myself I was strong. I had survived wars. I could survive widowhood. But surviving is not the same as living. The days stretched long and empty. My son called on Sundays. My daughter visited when she could. They loved me. I know they did. But love cannot replace presence. Sometimes I would realize I hadn't spoken out loud in an entire day. I kept the television on just to hear a human voice. I stopped cooking real meals. Cereal for dinner. Toast for lunch. One icy winter morning, I slipped on the porch steps. I wasn't badly hurt, just bruised, but I remember lying there staring at the gray sky thinking, if I don't get up, how long would it take for someone to notice? That thought frightened me more than death ever had. It wasn't dying that scared me. It was disappearing while still alive. The turning point came from a boy next door named Marcus, 16, tall, always wearing headphones. One afternoon he knocked and said his mother wanted to know if I needed help shoveling snow. I almost said no. Pride can be stubborn, but I let him help. Afterward, I invited him in for hot chocolate. We talked about school, then about history. He had an assignment about World War II. I told him about ration books and blackout curtains, about my father's return and the silence he carried home. Marcus listened like my words mattered, like I mattered. He started coming by once a week, sometimes to carry groceries, sometimes just to sit at the kitchen table and ask questions. What was it like marching in the 60s? Was I afraid during Vietnam? How did 9/11 feel from my living room? He began recording our conversations for a school project. Then he posted short clips online. My 94-year-old neighbor survived 3 wars. One caption read, "I laughed when he showed me." Who wants to hear an old woman talk? I asked. More people than you think, he said. Messages began appearing from strangers thanking me for sharing. Veterans saying my father's story sounded like theirs. Young people saying they had never heard history told with trembling hands and real tears before. One comment said, "Your voice makes me feel less alone." The irony nearly broke me because loneliness had almost taken me out quietly. I realized something powerful. The world still had room for me. My children noticed the difference in my voice. I sounded lighter, not because grief was gone, but because purpose had returned. Loneliness is a silent war. There are no medals for surviving it. It creeps into empty houses and whispers that you no longer matter. I fought through global wars without holding a weapon. I fought for justice with blistered feet. I fought through grief with shaking hands. But the hardest battle was against that whisper telling me I was finished. I am not finished. My hands may tremble, my knees may ache, and I may forget where I put my glasses. But my memories are alive. My heart still recognizes kindness. My voice still carries truth. I survived 3 wars, but what almost defeated me was being unseen. If you are listening to me now, remember this. Somewhere near you is a woman like me, sitting in a quiet house filled with stories no one has asked to hear. Knock on her door. Ask her a question. Sit at her table. You might think you are just passing time, but you could be saving a life, because sometimes the strongest generation is also the quietest, and sometimes all it takes to win the final battle is to be heard.